The harsh winter wind bit through Nathan Quinn's coat as he knelt alone before his wife's grave, tears freezing on his weathered cheeks. It had been exactly 1 year since typhoid had taken Sarah, leaving him alone with a ranch too big and a heart too broken in the unforgiving Montana territory of 1878. Nathan had never meant to be discovered that night. The creek bed where he'd stopped to water his horse was supposed to be deserted this time of year, especially after sunset when temperatures dropped below freezing. He thought he was alone when he finally let his grief pour out, his broad shoulders shaking as he wept into his worn leather hat, the moonlight casting long shadows across the rocky ground. "Is someone there?" The voice startled him like a gunshot. Nathan scrambled to his feet, hastily wiping his face with his sleeve. Pride demanded he hide his weakness, but it was too late. A woman stood a few yards away, her silhouette outlined against the starlit sky. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I heard something and thought maybe an animal was injured." Nathan cleared his throat. "No, madam, just me. I'll be on my way." But Olivia Easton didn't move aside. Instead, she took a step closer, and Nathan could finally make out her features in the dim light, kind eyes set in a face framed by dark hair escaping from beneath a practical bonnet. "Are you all right?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Just fine," Nathan lied, his voice rough from crying. Olivia hesitated only briefly before closing the distance between them. Without a word, she reached out and placed a gentle hand on his arm. The simple human contact, something he'd been without for so long, nearly broke him all over again. "Nobody should be alone with that much pain," she said quietly, and then she did something that changed everything. Instead of offering empty platitudes or uncomfortable pity, Olivia Easton simply stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. For a moment, Nathan stood frozen, but then the warmth of another human being, the compassion in that embrace, melted something inside him. His arms encircled her, and he allowed himself to be held, his face pressed against her shoulder. They remained that way for several minutes, two strangers connected by shared humanity under the vast Montana sky. When they finally separated, Nathan found he could breathe a little easier. "Thank you," he said simply, placing his hat back on his head. "Sometimes we all need someone to remind us we're not alone," Olivia replied. "I'm Olivia Easton. I've taken over the old Patterson place about 3 miles east." "Nathan Quinn," he offered, extending his hand. "My ranch is just over that ridge to the north." Neither knew it then, but that chance encounter by the creek would mark the beginning of a journey neither had expected to take again, a journey back to hope, to trust, and eventually to love. The next morning, Nathan rose before dawn as usual. The routine of ranch work had been his salvation during the past year. The mindless physical labor of feeding livestock, mending fences, and breaking horses left little room for dwelling on his loss. His foreman, Marcus Hoffman, and the 3 other hands who worked the Quinn ranch gave him space while keeping the operation running during his darkest days. As Nathan saddled his horse, Marcus approached with a steaming cup of coffee, heading out to check the north pasture. The older man asked, his beard now more gray than brown after 30 years of ranch work. Nathan nodded, taking the coffee gratefully. "Want to make sure none of the cattle wandered during last night's cold snap." Marcus hesitated, then said, "Saw smoke coming from the Patterson place yesterday. Heard in town a widow woman bought it. Might be worth riding over, being neighborly." Nathan's jaw tightened. The memory of the previous night's encounter flashed through his mind. Already met her, name's Easton, seems capable enough. Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. He'd known Nathan since he was a boy and recognized when not to push. As Nathan rode out, the morning sun cast long shadows across the frost-covered ground. He tried to focus on the task at hand, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Olivia Easton. There had been something in her eyes, not just kindness, but understanding. The kind that came from experience, not sympathy. The north pasture was secure, the cattle huddled together for warmth. Nathan found himself turning his horse eastward instead of back toward the ranch house. He told himself it was just being a good neighbor to check on someone new to the area, especially with winter settling in hard and early this year. The Patterson place came into view, a modest homestead with a small main house, barn, and corral. As he approached, Nathan saw Olivia in the yard, struggling with an armload of firewood. Without thinking, he urged his horse forward. "Need a hand with that, Mrs. Easton," he called out. Olivia looked up, surprise crossing her face before she smiled. "It's Miss Easton, actually." "And I wouldn't turn down the help." Nathan dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post. "Sorry for the assumption." "No harm done," she replied, handing him some of the wood. "Most women my age are married with a half-dozen children by now." Nathan guessed she was in her late 20s, perhaps 30, about 5 years younger than himself. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, but a few stubborn strands framed her face. In the daylight, he could see her eyes were a deep brown, with smile lines at the corners that suggested she'd known happiness before. As they carried the wood inside, Nathan took in the modest interior of the house. It was clean but sparsely furnished, with a few crates yet to be unpacked. "You've come a long way to start over," he observed, noting a shipping label from Cincinnati on one of the crates. Olivia nodded, arranging the wood beside the stove. "After my father passed last spring, there wasn't much keeping me in Ohio. I taught school there, but always dreamed of something more, adventurous." "Montana territory in winter is certainly adventurous," Nathan said, a hint of a smile crossing his face for the first time in months. "Not many would call it a dream, though." "Perhaps not," she agreed, straightening up and brushing dust from her apron. "But it's mine. 20 acres to call my own, space to breathe, and no one looking at me with pity every time I walk down the street." The last part slipped out, and Olivia looked momentarily embarrassed. "I'm sorry." "That was forward of me." Nathan shook his head. "No need to apologize for honesty. I understand better than most." A moment of silence passed between them, filled with unspoken recognition of shared experience. "Would you care for some coffee?" Olivia offered. "It's the least I can do for your help." Nathan knew he should decline, get back to the countless tasks waiting at his own ranch. Instead, he heard himself say, "That would be welcome, thank you." As Olivia busied herself with the coffee pot, Nathan removed his hat, suddenly conscious of his appearance. He hadn't shaved in days, and his clothes carried the dust and wear of hard work. But Olivia didn't seem to mind as she set a steaming cup before him. "So, Mr. Quinn, how long have you been in Montana?" she asked, sitting across from him at the small table. "Call me Nathan, please. Been here going on 8 years now. Came out after the war with Sarah." He stopped, surprised at how naturally her name had come to his lips. It had been months since he'd spoken it aloud. Olivia's expression softened. "Your wife?" Nathan nodded, his fingers tightening around the cup. "She passed last year, typhoid." "I'm sorry," Olivia said simply, without the excessive sympathy he'd come to dread from others. "And you?" Nathan asked, wanting to shift the conversation. "What brings a schoolteacher from Ohio to homestead alone in Montana?" A shadow crossed Olivia's face. "After Father died, I found myself untethered. I'd spent years caring for him after my mother passed. Teaching other people's children, watching them grow and leave. One day I realized if I didn't make a change, I'd wake up 20 years from now having lived someone else's idea of what my life should be." She smiled, though there was something wistful in it. "So I sold Father's house, bought this land sight unseen, and here I am, completely unprepared but determined." Nathan couldn't help but admire her courage, foolhardy though it might be. "Winter's harsh here. Have you stocked enough supplies, got your livestock situated?" "I have a milk cow, 2 horses, and some chickens," Olivia replied, "and enough preserved food to last through winter, I believe. The previous owner left the place in decent condition." "Old Patterson died 2 years back," Nathan explained. "His son tried running it for a while but went back east." "Place has been empty most of a year," Olivia nodded. "So I gathered from Mr. Donovan at the general store. He's been quite helpful, though I suspect he's taken bets on how long I'll last." Despite himself, Nathan chuckled. "Thomas Donovan's been taking bets on everything from horse races to how many eggs his wife's prized hen will lay since I've known him." Their conversation continued easily, surprising Nathan with how comfortable it felt. Before he realized it, an hour had passed. He rose reluctantly, placing his hat back on his head. "I should get back, but if you need anything, supplies, help with repairs, don't hesitate to send word to the Quinn Ranch. Any of my hands would be glad to assist." "Thank you, Nathan," Olivia said, walking him to the door. "And thank you for last night as well. Sometimes kindness comes from unexpected places." Nathan paused at the threshold. "I believe I was the recipient of kindness, not the giver." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection neither had anticipated. Nathan tipped his hat and stepped outside, suddenly eager to put distance between himself and the unfamiliar feelings stirring within him. As he rode home, Nathan couldn't shake the image of Olivia Easton from his mind. For the first time since Sarah's death, he'd spent an hour not thinking about his grief. The realization brought a wave of guilt. Was he already forgetting her, betraying her memory? But as the Quinn Ranch came into view, Nathan acknowledged a truth he'd been avoiding. Sarah would not have wanted him to live half a life. She had been vibrant, full of plans and dreams for their future. When the fever took her, it had been swift and merciless, leaving him no time to prepare for a world without her in it. "Keep living," she'd whispered in her final hours, her hand clutching his. "Promise me, Nathan." He'd made the promise but hadn't kept it. Existing wasn't living, and for a year, existing was all he'd managed. The thought that perhaps it was time to try for more terrified him almost as much as it gave him hope. 3 days passed before Nathan saw Olivia again. He'd kept busy, riding the boundaries of his property, working alongside his men to repair a section of fence damaged in a recent storm. But thoughts of the schoolteacher turned homesteader persisted, weaving through his days and into his dreams. On the 4th day, as Nathan rode into town for supplies, he spotted Olivia outside the general store, struggling with several heavy packages. Before he could offer assistance, he saw young Billy Donovan, the storekeeper's son, dash out to help her load them into a small wagon. Nathan hesitated, watching as Olivia smiled at the boy, saying something that made him laugh. The simple interaction shouldn't have affected him, yet Nathan felt a tightness in his chest. He considered riding on, completing his errands without acknowledging her presence. But as he debated, Olivia glanced up and saw him. Her face brightened with recognition, and she waved. Nathan found himself returning the gesture and guiding his horse toward her wagon. "Mr. Quinn," she greeted him, her cheeks pink from the cold. "What brings you to town?" "Need to restock some supplies," he replied, dismounting. "And you, the same. Though I may have underestimated how quickly flour disappears when one attempts to bake bread daily," she admitted with a self-deprecating smile, still determined to make a go of it then. Nathan asked, helping her secure the last of her packages. "More than ever," Olivia replied, her chin lifting slightly. "Though I've learned some hard lessons this week. Did you know chickens can freeze to death if their coop isn't properly insulated?" Nathan winced. "Lost some of your flock?" "2," she confirmed. "But I've moved the others into the barn for now until I can make better arrangements." Her practical approach to the setback impressed him. Many newcomers would have been discouraged by such losses. "I have some extra lumber at the ranch," Nathan found himself offering. "Could help you reinforce that coop before the next cold snap." Olivia's expression brightened. "I couldn't ask you to, you didn't ask," Nathan interrupted gently. "I offered. Neighbors help neighbors out here. It's how we all survive." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion further down the street. A group of cowboys from the Double Bar Ranch were emerging from the saloon, louder and rowdier than was typical for midday. "Looks like Wade Burton's men are celebrating payday early," Nathan observed, his tone disapproving. Olivia glanced toward the group. "Are they trouble?" "Not usually," Nathan replied. "Burton runs a tight outfit generally, but his men can get rough when they drink." As if to prove his point, one of the cowboys stumbled into the street, nearly colliding with a passing wagon. The driver shouted an obscenity, and the cowboy responded in kind, reaching for his pistol before one of his companions pulled him back. "Perhaps I should head back," Olivia said, gathering her reins. Nathan nodded. I'll ride alongside you to the edge of town if you don't mind the company. I'd welcome it, she admitted. As they made their way down the main street, Nathan noticed one of the cowboys watching Olivia with too much interest. He was a newcomer to the area, a man named Caleb Jenkins who'd hired on with the double bar the previous month. Something about the way he tracked Olivia's movements set Nathan's teeth on edge. "Miss Easton," Jenkins called out, stepping into the street. "Ain't you a sight prettier than anything else in this town?" Olivia tensed but kept her eyes forward, clearly intending to ignore the man. Jenkins moved closer, his hand reaching for Olivia's wagon. "Come on now, no need to be unfriendly, just paying a compliment to the loveliest new resident of our little community." Nathan urged his horse between Jenkins and Olivia's wagon. "The lady's not interested, Jenkins, back off." Jenkins' expression hardened. "Didn't realize she was spoken for, Quinn. You staking a claim already? Your wife's barely cold in the ground." The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. His hand twitched toward his sidearm, but he checked the impulse. Drawing on a drunken fool in the middle of town wouldn't solve anything. "Miss Easton is my neighbor," Nathan said evenly, "and she deserves respect, same as any lady. Now step aside before you say something you'll regret when you're sober." For a tense moment, it seemed Jenkins might escalate the confrontation, but one of the older double-bar hands called out, "Come on, Caleb, leave it be. Boss is waiting on us." Jenkins held Nathan's gaze a moment longer, then spat in the dirt and turned away. "Another time then," he muttered. Nathan remained between Jenkins and Olivia until the cowboys moved on down the street. Only then did he turn to her, concerned by how pale she'd become. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Olivia nodded, though her hands were tight on the reins. "Yes, thank you for intervening." "Jenkins is new around here. Doesn't understand the ways yet," Nathan explained, though the excuse felt hollow even to his own ears. "I've encountered his type before," Olivia said, her voice steadier than he expected. Though in Cincinnati, they typically wore finer clothes and used prettier words. The intent remains the same. Nathan wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he simply rode beside her in silence until they reached the edge of town. As promised, he accompanied her a little further until they could no longer hear the sounds of timberline behind them. "I meant what I said about the lumber," Nathan said as they prepared to part ways, he toward his ranch and she toward her homestead. "I can bring it by tomorrow if that suits." Olivia studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Why are you being so kind to me, Nathan?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. "Like I said, neighbors look out for each other." "Is that all it is?" she pressed gently. Nathan shifted in his saddle, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. "What else would it be?" Olivia held his gaze. "Perhaps a recognition of something familiar, a shared understanding of what it means to start over when you never asked to." Her perception unnerved him. "I'm not starting over," he said, more sharply than he intended. "My life is what it is." If his tone wounded her, Olivia didn't show it. She simply nodded. "Of course, forgive my presumption. I would be grateful for your help with the coup if the offer still stands." Nathan immediately regretted his harshness. "It does. I'll come by mid-morning if that works for you." "I'll have coffee waiting," she promised with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. As they parted ways, Nathan felt a familiar weight settle back onto his shoulders. For a brief time in her company, he'd felt lighter somehow. Now, riding alone across the winter landscape, the emptiness of his existence pressed in around him once more. Back at the ranch, Nathan found Marcus in the barn, examining the hoof of one of their draft horses. "Stone bruise," the foreman explained. "Nothing serious, but we should rest him a few days." Nathan nodded absently, his mind still on his conversation with Olivia. Marcus straightened up, studying his employer with knowing eyes. "Ran into Thomas Donovan yesterday. Says you've been spending time with the new woman at the Patterson place." "Just being neighborly," Nathan replied, unbuckling his saddle. "She's alone out there, doesn't know the first thing about surviving a Montana winter." "Uh-huh," Marcus said, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "And it's got nothing to do with her being pretty as a spring morning." Nathan shot him a warning look. "It's not like that." "Didn't say it was," Marcus replied mildly. "But it wouldn't be wrong if it was, Nathan. Sarah's been gone a year now. She wouldn't want, I know what Sarah would want, Nathan interrupted, his voice tight. Everyone seems eager to tell me as if I didn't know my own wife. Marcus held up his hands in surrender. Just saying, son, life's too short and too hard out here to refuse happiness when it comes along. Nathan said nothing, focusing instead on caring for his horse. But Marcus's words followed him through the evening and into the night, mingling with memories of Sarah and newer thoughts of Olivia that left him restless and conflicted. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Nathan rose early, loaded the promised lumber onto a wagon, and headed toward the Easton homestead. As he approached, he saw smoke rising from the chimney and Olivia in the yard, spreading feed for her remaining chickens. She looked up at the sound of his wagon, raising a hand in greeting. Despite his inner turmoil, Nathan felt something lift within him at the sight of her, bundled against the cold but moving with purpose and energy. "Good morning," she called as he pulled the wagon to a stop. "You're earlier than I expected." "Thought we'd want to finish before the temperature drops this afternoon," Nathan explained, climbing down from the wagon. "Weather's changing, might get snow by evening." Olivia glanced at the clear sky skeptically. "It looks perfect to me," Nathan smiled slightly. "That's how it gets you out here. Blue skies one moment, blizzard the next. You learn to read the signs." "Well, I'm grateful for both your carpentry skills and your weather predictions," Olivia said, gesturing toward the house. "Come in for coffee first, it's ready as promised." Nathan was tempted to suggest they get straight to work, but the warmth in her invitation was difficult to resist. "Just a quick cup," he agreed. Inside, Olivia's home looked more settled than during his previous visit. Curtains now hung at the windows and a colorful quilt draped over the back of a chair. Books lined a small shelf, and a vase of dried wildflowers sat on the table, small touches that transformed the simple cabin into something more personal. "You've made it homey," Nathan observed, removing his hat. Olivia smiled, pouring coffee into 2 cups. "It helps to have your own things around you, makes a strange place feel more familiar." Nathan accepted the offered cup, warming his hands around it. "How are you finding it so far, being out here on your own?" "Challenging," Olivia admitted, sitting across from him, "but rewarding too. There's something satisfying about handling everything yourself even when it goes wrong." "Which it often does," Nathan added with a hint of humor. "Indeed," she laughed softly. "Yesterday I tried to fix a leak in the roof, ended up with more holes than I started with." "I could take a look at that too while I'm here," Nathan offered. Olivia studied him for a moment. "You know, I didn't come west expecting to be rescued, Nathan. I came to stand on my own." "It's not a rescue to accept help," he replied. "Out here, independence is important, but so is knowing when to rely on others. Even the most seasoned ranchers need a hand sometimes." She considered this, then nodded. "You're right, of course, and I would appreciate your expertise with the roof. But perhaps you could show me how it's done properly, so next time I can manage alone." "Fair enough," Nathan agreed, surprising himself with how much he enjoyed her determination. Sarah had been the same way, never wanting to be coddled, always eager to learn. The thought of Sarah didn't bring the usual stab of pain. Instead, he felt a gentle warmth, as if her memory approved of this moment. They finished their coffee and headed outside to begin work on the chicken coop. Nathan laid out the lumber while Olivia gathered the tools she had. They were basic but adequate, though Nathan was glad he'd brought some of his own. "First thing is to insulate these walls better," Nathan explained, showing Olivia how to create a double layer with straw packed between. "Chickens generate their own heat if they're protected from the wind and wet." Olivia proved to be a quick study and a willing worker. She didn't hesitate to get her hands dirty or take on her share of the physical labor. By midday, they had made significant progress, reinforcing the walls and adding a proper roosting area elevated off the ground. As they paused to eat the simple lunch Olivia had prepared, bread, cheese, and apples, Nathan found himself more relaxed than he'd been in months. There was something about purposeful work shared with good company that eased the soul. "Tell me about your ranch," Olivia said as they sat on upturned crates in the weak winter sunlight. "How large is it?" "Nearly 2,000 acres now," Nathan replied. "Started with just 500. Sarah and I built it up over the years, adding parcels when we could afford them. That's impressive, Olivia said. You must run quite a herd. About 800 head of cattle currently, plus 30 horses, some for work, some we breed and train for selling. Pride crept into Nathan's voice as he spoke of the operation he'd built. We've got good water rights, decent grazing even in drought years. And you manage all this with just 4 men? Olivia asked, clearly impressed. 5 including me, Nathan corrected. Though we hire extra hands during calving and roundup, Marcus, my foreman, has been with me since the beginning. Man knows more about cattle than anyone I've ever met. You sound like you love it, Olivia observed. Nathan considered this. I do. Even on the hardest days, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. He paused, then asked, what about you? Do you miss teaching? A shadow crossed Olivia's face. Parts of it. I loved the children, watching them learn and grow, but after Father died. She trailed off, looking toward the distant mountains. What happened? Nathan asked gently. Olivia was quiet for a moment before responding. There was a man, the school superintendent. He'd shown interest in me for years, but I'd always declined his attentions. After Father passed, he became more persistent, made it clear that my position at the school was contingent on my receptiveness to his proposals. Nathan felt a surge of anger on her behalf. He threatened your livelihood, not explicitly, Olivia clarified. He was too careful for that, but the implication was clear. I could either become Mrs. Edward Harrington or find myself without a teaching position when the new term began. So you came west instead, Nathan concluded. Olivia nodded. I could have found another teaching position elsewhere, I suppose, but the idea of starting completely fresh, being beholden to no one, was too appealing to resist. They fell silent, finishing their meal as the sun climbed higher. Despite the clear sky, Nathan noticed the telltale shift in the wind that signaled approaching weather. We should finish up, he said, rising. That storm's coming faster than I thought. They worked steadily through the afternoon, completing the chicken coop and then moving on to the roof repairs. As Nathan had predicted, clouds began gathering on the western horizon, dark and heavy with snow. There, he said, securing the last of the patched shingles, should hold tight now. Olivia, who had been handing him materials from the ladder, smiled up at him. Thank you, Nathan. I can't tell you how much I appreciate all your help today. As they descended and gathered the tools, the first few snowflakes began to fall. Nathan glanced at the sky with concern. Storm's moving in fast. I should head back while there's still light. Olivia followed his gaze, her expression growing worried. Will you make it before it gets bad? Should, Nathan replied, though he was less confident than he sounded. The clouds were rolling in faster than he'd anticipated, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. You could stay, Olivia suggested hesitantly. Until it passes, I mean. I wouldn't want you caught out in a blizzard because you were helping me. The offer was practical, sensible even, but Nathan felt a rush of conflicting emotions at the thought of spending the night under Olivia's roof. I'll be fine, he assured her, perhaps too quickly. I know this land like the back of my hand. Disappointment flickered across Olivia's face, though she hid it quickly. Of course, but please be careful. Nathan loaded his tools into the wagon as the snowfall intensified. By the time he was ready to leave, a thin white blanket covered the ground and visibility was already diminishing. Remember what I showed you about banking the stove overnight, Nathan said as he prepared to depart. And keep extra firewood inside. If this storm is as bad as it looks, you don't want to be digging through snowdrifts for fuel. I will, Olivia promised. She hesitated, then impulsively stepped forward and embraced him briefly. Thank you again, Nathan, for everything. The unexpected contact left Nathan momentarily speechless. He managed a nod, put on his hat, and climbed onto the wagon seat. I'll check on you once the weather clears, he said, gathering the reins. As he drove away, the snow falling heavier around him, Nathan could still feel the warmth of Olivia's arms around him. It had been so long since he'd experienced such a simple human connection that the sensation was almost overwhelming. The journey back to his ranch proved more challenging than Nathan had anticipated. Within an hour, the snow was falling so thickly that he could barely see the trail ahead. The temperature plummeted and the wind picked up, driving icy particles against his face and hands. Nathan relied on instinct and familiarity with the terrain to guide him. Even so, he missed a turn in the whiteout conditions and found himself off course. Cursing under his breath, he corrected his direction, but the detour had cost him valuable time and daylight. By the time the lights of the Quinn ranch finally appeared through the swirling snow, darkness had fallen completely, and Nathan was chilled to the bone. Marcus rushed out to meet him as he pulled the wagon into the yard. "Was about to send out a search party," the foreman said, helping Nathan down from the seat. "Didn't expect you to get caught in this." "Storm came in faster than I thought," Nathan admitted, his teeth chattering. "Lost the trail for a bit." Marcus guided him into the warmth of the main house, where a roaring fire awaited. "Must have been some chicken coop to keep you out there all day," he remarked, though there was no judgment in his tone. Nathan sank gratefully into a chair near the fire, extending his frozen hands toward the flames. "Fixed her roof too, place needed work." Marcus brought him a cup of hot coffee liberally laced with whiskey. "Drink this, then you're getting into dry clothes before you catch your death." As warmth gradually returned to his limbs, Nathan found his thoughts turning to Olivia. Was she warm enough? Had she remembered his instructions about the stove? The storm was intensifying by the minute, howling around the eaves of the sturdy ranch house. Her smaller cabin would be more vulnerable to the cold. "You're worried about her," Marcus observed, reading Nathan's expression. Nathan didn't bother denying it. "She's not used to our winters. Cabin's old, drafty in places." "She survived this long," Marcus pointed out. "Woman smart enough to come all the way from Ohio on her own can probably handle a snowstorm." "You're right," Nathan agreed, though the concern lingered. "Just hope that roof holds." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "You know, it's all right to care about someone again. Doesn't dishonor what you had before." Nathan stared into the flames, unable to respond. The words touched too closely on the conflict raging within him, the guilt he felt at the growing warmth in his heart whenever he thought of Olivia, the fear that moving forward meant leaving Sarah behind. "Get some rest," Marcus said, clapping him gently on the shoulder. "Nothing to be done tonight anyway. Roads will be impassable till this blows over." Nathan nodded, but as he made his way to his bedroom, he knew sleep would be elusive. Outside, the blizzard raged on, and somewhere out in that fury was a woman who had, against all odds, begun to awaken feelings he'd thought were buried forever. The storm lasted 3 days, blanketing the countryside in snow several feet deep. When it finally cleared, revealing a blindingly bright landscape under a crystal blue sky, Nathan wasted no time preparing to check on Olivia. "Take the sleigh," Marcus suggested as Nathan bundled up. "Wagon won't make it through these drifts." It was sound advice. Nathan hitched his 2 strongest horses to the sleigh and loaded it with extra supplies, food, firewood, blankets, unsure what he might find at the Easton homestead. The journey was slow and difficult, the horses laboring through deep snow despite the relative lightness of the sleigh. Nathan's anxiety grew with each passing mile. What if something had happened to her? What if the roof had collapsed under the weight of the snow, or the fire had gone out, leaving her to freeze? When the homestead finally came into view, Nathan felt a rush of relief at the sight of smoke rising steadily from the chimney. As he drew closer, he saw that someone, Olivia herself, presumably had cleared a path from the house to the barn. The chicken coop they'd reinforced stood intact, with no sign of damage. Before he could reach the yard, the door of the cabin opened and Olivia emerged, wrapped in a heavy shawl. She waved, her face breaking into a smile that warmed Nathan more effectively than any fire. "You survived." She called as he brought the sleigh to a stop. "I was about to say the same to you," Nathan replied, securing the reins and climbing down. "How did you fare during the storm?" "Better than I expected," Olivia admitted, "thanks to your repairs and advice. The roof didn't leak a drop, and I kept the fire going just as you showed me." Nathan looked around, impressed by how well she'd managed. "You cleared all this yourself?" "Had to," she explained. "Needed to reach the animals. The poor things were terrified by the howling wind." She looked tired, Nathan realized, with dark circles under her eyes suggesting sleepless nights. But there was also a certain pride in her bearing, the satisfaction of having faced a challenge and overcome it. "I brought some supplies," Nathan said, gesturing to the sleigh. "Wasn't sure what you might need." Olivia's expression softened. "That was thoughtful of you. Come inside first, though. You must be frozen after that ride." The cabin was warm and inviting, with a hearty stew simmering on the stove that filled the air with a savory aroma. Nathan removed his hat and coat, accepting the cup of hot coffee Olivia offered. "I was worried about you," he admitted, warming his hands around the cup. "When the storm hit so hard, I feared you might not be prepared." "I won't pretend it wasn't frightening at times," Olivia said, sitting across from him. "The second night, the wind was so fierce I thought the whole house might blow away, but I kept thinking about what you said, how folks out here endure by being prepared and staying calm." Nathan felt a surge of admiration for her resilience. Many would have panicked, especially alone in such conditions. "You're tougher than you look, Olivia Easton," she smiled at that. "I'm learning to be, though I confess there were moments I questioned my decision to come west." "It's one thing to read about frontier life in books, quite another to live it." "Having second thoughts?" Nathan asked, surprised by how much he dreaded her answer. Olivia considered the question, her gaze drifting to the window where the vast white landscape stretched to the horizon. "No," she said finally. "Despite everything, I feel more alive here than I ever did in Cincinnati. More myself." The conviction in her voice stirred something in Nathan, a recognition of the same fierce love for this harsh, beautiful land that had captured his own heart years ago. They spent the morning unloading the supplies Nathan had brought and checking the condition of the outbuildings. The barn had withstood the storm well, though a section of fencing had collapsed under the weight of a snowdrift. Together, they cleared away the snow and made temporary repairs. "It will need proper fixing come spring," Nathan explained, "but this should hold until then." Olivia nodded, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I'm starting to realize homesteading is mostly fixing things that break and preparing for the next thing that will," Nathan chuckled. "That's about the sum of it, but there are good days, 2 days, when the land gives back more than it takes." As they worked, the conversation flowed easily between them. Nathan found himself sharing stories of his early days in Montana, the mistakes he'd made, the lessons he'd learned. Olivia, in turn, told him more about her life in Cincinnati, her years of teaching, caring for her ailing father, the gradual realization that she wanted something different for herself. "He wasn't a bad man, Edward Harrington," she said as they rested on a fallen log, catching their breath after clearing the last of the snow from the chicken coop. "Just entitled. He couldn't understand why I'd refuse him when he was offering what most women in my position would consider a fortunate match. Some people can't comprehend choosing freedom over security," Nathan observed. Olivia glanced at him. "Did you ever regret it, coming west, taking the risk?" Nathan thought about the question seriously. "There were hard times, days when nothing went right, when I wondered if we'd made a terrible mistake. But no, I never truly regretted it. This land gets in your blood, becomes part of you." "I think I'm beginning to understand that," Olivia said softly. As the short winter day began to wane, Nathan knew he should head back to his own ranch. But he found himself reluctant to leave, to break the easy companionship they'd established. "Stay for supper," Olivia invited, seeming to read his thoughts. "That stew's been cooking all day." "Far too much for just me." Nathan knew he should decline. The roads would be difficult to navigate in darkness, and staying for a meal felt like crossing some invisible boundary he'd set for himself. But the thought of returning to his empty house, eating alone at his kitchen table, suddenly seemed unbearably bleak. "I'd like that," he said simply. Olivia's smile was worth any complication his decision might bring. They returned to the warmth of the cabin, and Nathan helped her set the table while she put the finishing touches on the meal. The domesticity of the scene struck him forcefully, how natural it felt to move around this small space with her, anticipating each other's needs, working in tandem. The stew was delicious, rich with vegetables and tender chunks of beef. Nathan hadn't realized how hungry he was until the first bite awakened his appetite. "This is wonderful," he said with genuine appreciation. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother before she passed," Olivia replied. "She believed every child, boy or girl, should know how to prepare a proper meal, said it was as essential as reading or figuring sums." "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Olivia agreed, a hint of sadness in her smile. "I think she would have approved of this adventure, though my father would have been horrified. He believed women needed protection above all else." "And what do you believe?" Nathan asked. Olivia considered the question. "I believe we all need connection more than protection. The freedom to choose our own paths, yes, but also the comfort of knowing we're not walking them entirely alone." Her words resonated deeply with Nathan. Since Sarah's death, he'd isolated himself, declining invitations to town gatherings, avoiding situations that might lead to emotional entanglements. He'd told himself it was respect for her memory, but perhaps it had been fear of feeling again, of risking the pain of loss. "I've been existing, not living," he said quietly, the admission surprising even himself. "Sarah made me promise to keep living, but I haven't kept that promise." Olivia reached across the table and covered his hand with her own. "It takes tremendous courage to open yourself to life again after loss. There's no timeline for grief, Nathan." The warmth of her touch, the understanding in her eyes, they broke something open inside him. Nathan found himself telling her about Sarah, not just the fact of her death, but the vibrant woman she'd been in life. He spoke of their dreams for the ranch, the children they'd hoped to have, the future that had been snatched away so suddenly. "She loved thunderstorms," he said, smiling at the memory. "Used to drag me outside to watch them roll in across the plains, said it was God's way of reminding us how small we are." Olivia listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. As the evening deepened around them, the lamp casting a warm glow over the table, Nathan realized he'd spoken more about Sarah in these hours than he had in the entire year since her death. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, "for listening, for understanding." "Thank you for sharing her with me," Olivia replied softly. "She sounds like someone I would have liked very much." The simple statement, offered without jealousy or comparison, touched Nathan deeply. In that moment, he could almost imagine Sarah and Olivia as friends, laughing together, appreciating each other's strength and spirit. Outside, the temperature had dropped dramatically, and the wind had picked up again. Nathan moved to the window, frowning at the darkened landscape. "Weather's turning again," he observed. "Might be another storm coming." Olivia joined him at the window, her shoulder brushing against his arm. "You shouldn't try to make it back tonight. It's too dangerous in the dark, especially if more snow is coming." The practical suggestion carried implications that neither could ignore. Nathan turned to face her, struggling to find the right words. "I could sleep in the barn," he offered. "It's warm enough with the animals." Olivia shook her head. "Don't be ridiculous. There's a perfectly good bedroll here by the fire. I won't have you risking frostbite out of some misplaced sense of propriety." Her directness startled a laugh from him. "When you put it that way, it does seem foolish. Besides," she added more softly, "I'd rest easier knowing you're safe." The simple admission of concern touched him. How long had it been since someone had worried about his well-being, since his presence had mattered to another person in such a fundamental way? "All right," he agreed. "If you're sure." They prepared for the night with careful attention to boundaries. Olivia retreated behind a screen in the corner to change into her night clothes, while Nathan arranged the bedroll near the stove, adding wood to ensure the fire would last through the night. When Olivia emerged, dressed in a modest nightgown with a heavy shawl wrapped around her shoulders, Nathan was struck by how vulnerable she appeared, and how trusting she was to allow him, still essentially a stranger, to share her home overnight. "Good night, Nathan," she said, climbing into her bed on the far side of the small room. "Sleep well." "Good night, Olivia," he replied, settling onto the bedroll. "Thank you for your hospitality." As he lay in the darkness, listening to the wind outside and the gentle rhythm of Olivia's breathing across the room, Nathan realized something profound had shifted within him. The weight of grief that had been his constant companion for a year had not vanished, but it had changed, transformed from a crushing burden into something he could carry while still moving forward. For the first time since Sarah's death, Nathan fell asleep with a sense of peace, the promise of tomorrow feeling like a gift rather than an obligation to endure. Morning brought clear skies and bitter cold. Nathan woke to find Olivia already up, stoking the fire and preparing breakfast. She dressed while he slept, her hair neatly braided and pinned up. "The thermometer outside says it's 15 below," she reported as he sat up, "but at least the wind has died down." Nathan rose, folding the bedroll neatly. Perfect day for travel, actually, cold but clear, good visibility. They shared a simple breakfast of oatmeal and coffee, the easy companionship of the previous day continuing. Neither mentioned the intimacy of having shared the small space overnight, but something had undeniably changed between them, a deepening of trust, a comfortable familiarity that belied their short acquaintance. As Nathan prepared to leave, checking the horses and sleigh, Olivia brought out a small package wrapped in cloth. "Some bread for your journey," she explained, handing it to him. "And to share with your men, it's the least I can do after all your help." Nathan accepted the gift, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, not just for this, but for everything." Olivia met his gaze, her eyes clear and direct. "Will I see you again soon, Nathan?" The question held no artifice, no coy pretense, just an honest desire to know where they stood. "Yes," he replied with equal directness. "If you'd like that, I would," she said simply. Nathan hesitated, then reached out to take her gloved hand in his. "So would I." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then Nathan released her hand, climbed onto the sleigh, and with a final nod set off toward home. As he traveled across the snow-covered landscape, Nathan felt lighter than he had in months. The future, which had seemed so bleak and predetermined, now held potential for something he hadn't dared hope for, not just existence, but life with its full measure of joy and connection. The next 6 weeks passed in a pattern that gradually became familiar. Nathan visited Olivia every few days, always with a practical reason, bringing supplies, helping with repairs, checking on her livestock. But both recognized these were pretexts for what they truly sought, each other's company. With each visit, they learned more about one another. Nathan discovered Olivia's passion for books, her quiet but determined opinions on everything from politics to horse training. Olivia came to understand the depth of Nathan's connection to his land, his unwavering sense of responsibility to his workers, his dry humor that emerged more frequently as he relaxed in her presence. Word spread quickly in the small community. Nathan caught occasional knowing looks from Marcus and the other ranch hands. In town, he noticed how conversations sometimes halted when he entered the general store, resuming with 2 casual questions about the schoolteacher out at the old Patterson place. For the most part, the attention was benign, even supportive. Thomas Donovan's wife, Mary, made a point of telling Nathan how pleased she was to see that nice Miss Easton settling in so well, with a significant look that left no doubt as to her meaning. Pastor Williams nodded approvingly when Nathan accompanied Olivia to Sunday services, but not all reactions were positive. Jenkins, the troublesome cowboy from the double bar, made a point of watching them whenever their paths crossed in town, his expression calculated and cold. Nathan kept Olivia close during these encounters, unwilling to risk another confrontation. As winter began to loosen its grip on the land, with patches of bare ground appearing and the days lengthening perceptibly, Nathan found himself at a crossroads. His feelings for Olivia had grown beyond friendship, beyond the comfort of shared experiences. Yet he hesitated to speak of them, uncertain if she felt the same, afraid of rushing what felt too precious to risk. The decision was made for him on an unusually warm day in early March. Nathan had ridden over to help Olivia prepare a small plot for a vegetable garden, turning the soil that was finally thawing enough to work. They labored side by side through the morning, talking easily about plans for the coming season. I was thinking of adding some fruit trees along the south side, Olivia said, pausing to wipe her brow. Apples, maybe a couple of plum trees if they'll grow here. They'll grow, Nathan assured her. Might take a few years to bear properly, but they'll take if you care for them right. Olivia smiled, her face flushed from exertion and the strengthening sun. A few years. I like the sound of that, planning that far ahead for this place. Nathan leaned on his shovel, studying her. So you're planning to stay then, for good? Yes, she said without hesitation. This is home now. I can't imagine being anywhere else. The certainty in her voice filled Nathan with a surge of joy he couldn't contain. Without conscious thought, he stepped toward her, closing the distance between them. Olivia looked up at him, her expression open and expectant. Olivia, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I need to tell you, the moment was shattered by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. They turned to see a rider galloping toward the homestead, pushing his horse hard. As he drew closer, Nathan recognized Marcus, his expression grim. What is it? Nathan called as his foreman reined in. Jenkins and some of the double bar boys hit the south pasture, Marcus reported, breathing hard. They're driving off cattle, at least 50 head by my count. Charlie's tracking them, but we need to move fast. Nathan's mind shifted immediately to the crisis at hand. Cattle rustling was more than theft, it was a direct challenge, one that couldn't go unanswered. How many men? He asked sharply. 4, maybe 5, Marcus replied. Jenkins, for sure, couldn't make out the others clearly. Nathan turned to Olivia, apology in his eyes. I have to go. Of course you do, she said immediately. Be careful, Nathan. He wanted to say more, to finish what he'd started to tell her, but there was no time. With a nod to Marcus, he ran for his horse, swung into the saddle, and spurred the animal toward his ranch, where he would gather his men and weapons before pursuing the rustlers. The pursuit lasted 2 days, following the stolen cattle into rough country where the double bar land bordered Nathan's property. It was dangerous work, made more so by the unstable ground, still frozen in places but turning to treacherous mud in others as the spring thaw continued. They caught up to Jenkins and his accomplices near a narrow canyon where the rustlers had attempted to hide the stolen herd. The confrontation was brief but violent. Jenkins fired first, the shot narrowly missing Marcus. Nathan's men returned fire, wounding one of the rustlers and sending the others, including Jenkins, fleeing into the rocks. They recovered the cattle, all bearing the Quinn brand, and drove them slowly back toward the ranch. Nathan sent Charlie ahead to alert the sheriff in Timberline about the incident, knowing this wouldn't be the end of the matter. By the time they reached the Quinn ranch, Nathan was exhausted, saddle sore, and troubled by the escalation of hostility. Wade Burton, owner of the Double Bar, was not a man known for backing down from a fight. That Jenkins had felt bold enough to steal Quinn cattle suggested either Burton was behind the theft or had lost control of his men. After ensuring the recovered herd was secure and his injured hand, Tom Miller, was properly tended to, Nathan fell into an exhausted sleep. But his dreams were haunted by visions of Olivia in danger, Jenkins's mocking face, and Sarah's voice whispering warnings he couldn't quite understand. He woke before dawn, determined to ride to town and speak with Sheriff Davis, then check on Olivia. The rustling incident had shaken him more than he cared to admit, not just the theft itself, but the realization of how quickly violence could erupt, how easily the life he was beginning to rebuild could be threatened. Marcus found him in the barn, saddling his horse. You heading to town? Nathan nodded. Need to give Davis a full account before Burton spins his own version, then I'm going to check on Olivia. Figured as much. Marcus hesitated, then added, you should know there's talk in town about you and Miss Easton. What kind of talk? Nathan asked, though he could guess. Nothing bad, Marcus assured him, just speculation, questions about intentions, that sort of thing. Nathan tightened the cinch on his saddle with more force than necessary. My intentions are my business. Of course they are, Marcus agreed mildly. But in a place this small, folks notice when a man spends as much time at a single woman's homestead as you've been spending at Miss Easton's. Especially a woman as pretty and well-spoken as her. Nathan sighed, recognizing the truth in his foreman's words. I care for her, Marcus. More than I thought possible after Sarah. The admission, spoken aloud for the first time, felt both frightening and freeing. Marcus nodded, satisfaction in his weathered face. Good, she's a fine woman. Reminds me a bit of Sarah in her spirit, though they couldn't look more different. Yes, Nathan agreed softly. That's what drew me to her, I think. Not because she's like Sarah, but because she has that same light, that same strength. Then don't waste time, Marcus advised. Life's too short and too uncertain out here to hesitate when you find something worth holding on to. With those words echoing in his mind, Nathan rode first to Timberline, where he gave Sheriff Davis a detailed account of the rustling incident. The sheriff, a former Army scout with little patience for lawlessness, promised to investigate and to speak with Wade Burton personally. Burton's always pushed boundaries, Davis observed, stroking his gray mustache. But outright rustling, that's a hanging offense. If he ordered it, he's a fool. If he didn't know about it, he's losing control of his outfit. Either way, it's trouble, Nathan replied grimly. Davis nodded. I'll handle it. Meanwhile, keep your men alert. This may not be over. The warning weighed on Nathan as he rode toward Olivia's homestead. He'd been focused on his own growing feelings, on the possibility of a future with her, without fully considering what that might mean for her safety. If his enemies became hers by association, was it fair to pursue the connection between them? These troubled thoughts occupied him so completely that he nearly missed the sign that something was wrong when he approached the Easton property. But years of survival instincts made him rein in sharply when he spotted fresh hoofprints cutting across the muddy track. Multiple horses, moving at speed. Drawing his rifle from its scabbard, Nathan approached more cautiously. As the cabin came into view, he saw Olivia in the yard, apparently unharmed, hanging laundry on a line. But her movements were jerky, tense, and she kept glancing toward the barn. Nathan's instincts screamed warning. He dismounted quietly, secured his horse to a tree, and moved forward on foot, using the natural contours of the land for cover. As he drew closer, he caught sight of what had Olivia so on edge: 3 horses tied at the far side of the barn, out of sight from the main road. One bore the distinctive blaze marking of Jenkins's mount. Cold fury filled Nathan. Jenkins had come here to Olivia's home while Nathan was occupied with the stolen cattle. Whether to threaten her or use her as leverage against Nathan, the intent was clearly malicious. Moving silently closer, Nathan caught snippets of conversation from inside the barn. Just a friendly visit, Miss Easton. No need to look so frightened. Jenkins's mocking voice was unmistakable. A second voice, deeper and rougher, added, Quinn's cost us plenty. Seems only fair we take something of his in return. I belong to no one, came Olivia's clear reply, her voice remarkably steady despite the situation. And I'll thank you to leave my property immediately. A harsh laugh. Hear that, boys? The schoolmarm's giving orders now. Nathan had heard enough. He positioned himself at the barn door, rifle ready, and called out, Jenkins, come out with your hands where I can see them. A startled silence followed, then Jenkins's voice, tight with anger. Quinn, should have known you'd come running to check on your woman. My patience is about gone, Nathan replied coldly. You and your friends come out now or I start shooting. A tense moment passed before the barn door creaked open. Jenkins emerged first, hands raised to shoulder height but his posture defiant. Behind him came 2 other men Nathan recognized as double-bar hands: Reed Wilson and Joe Blackburn, both known troublemakers. This is private property, Nathan said, keeping his rifle trained on Jenkins. You weren't invited. Jenkins's mouth twisted in a sneer. Just paying a social call on the lovely Miss Easton. No law against being neighborly. 3 armed men threatening a woman alone isn't neighborly, Nathan countered. It's cowardice. Jenkins's face darkened. We weren't threatening nobody, just having a conversation. Is that right, Olivia? Nathan called, not taking his eyes off the 3 men. Olivia appeared in the doorway of the barn, her face pale but composed. They suggested I might want to reconsider my associations, she said carefully, for my own safety. The implied threat made Nathan's blood boil, but he kept his voice steady. Get on your horses, ride out, don't come back. For a moment it seemed Jenkins might resist. His hand twitched toward his holstered pistol and Nathan tensed, ready to fire if necessary. But Reed Wilson, apparently having more sense than his companion, muttered, "Come on, Caleb, this ain't worth dying over." The tension held for another heartbeat before Jenkins relaxed slightly. "This isn't finished, Quinn," he said, his voice low and venomous. "Not by a long shot." "It is for today," Nathan replied evenly. "Now ride." Under Nathan's unwavering aim, the three men mounted their horses and rode away, Jenkins turning once to cast a final glare of hatred before they disappeared over the rise. Only when they were out of sight did Nathan lower his rifle and turn to Olivia. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" She shook her head, though he could see she was trembling now that the immediate danger had passed. "No, they didn't touch me, just said things, implied things." Nathan closed the distance between them in 3 strides, gathering her into his arms. Olivia came willingly, pressing against him as if seeking to absorb his strength. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "This is my fault. They came here because of me." Olivia pulled back enough to look up at him, her expression fierce despite the fear lingering in her eyes. "Don't you dare take responsibility for their actions. They chose to come here. They chose to threaten me." Her courage humbled him. Many women would have been hysterical after such an encounter, but Olivia's primary emotion seemed to be indignation rather than terror. "Still," Nathan insisted, "they targeted you because of your connection to me, and that puts you in danger." Understanding dawned in Olivia's eyes. "And now you're thinking you should stay away to protect me." The directness of her assessment startled him. "The thought crossed my mind," he admitted. Olivia stepped back, her chin lifting in a gesture he'd come to recognize as determination. "Well, you can uncross it immediately, Nathan Quinn. I didn't come all the way to Montana to let some bullies determine who I can associate with." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Nathan felt a smile tugging at his lips. "You're a stubborn woman, Olivia Easton." "So I've been told," she replied, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. "Now, are you going to tell me what you were about to say before Marcus interrupted us the other day?" The abrupt change of subject caught Nathan off guard. With the threat of Jenkins and his companions still fresh, declarations of feeling seemed inappropriate. Yet looking at Olivia, her courage, her directness, her unwavering gaze, Nathan knew he couldn't equivocate any longer. "I was going to tell you that I've fallen in love with you," he said simply. "That I never expected to feel this way again after Sarah, but here I am, thinking about you when you're not around, worrying about you, wanting to be with you." The words, once released, flowed naturally. "I know it's fast. I know there are complications, the ranch, your homestead, people like Jenkins, but I'm tired of letting fear rule my life. I lost one future I'd planned. I don't want to lose another by being too afraid to reach for it." Olivia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her smile was radiant. "I love you too, Nathan. I think I started falling the moment you let me hold you by the creek that night, not because you needed comfort, but because you accepted it from a stranger, no less." The memory of that night, his breakdown, her unexpected kindness felt like a lifetime ago, though barely 3 months had passed. How quickly life could change, Nathan reflected. How swiftly the heart could heal and open again, given the right circumstances. "What happens now?" Olivia asked softly. Nathan took her hand, leading her toward the house. "Now we make plans, together, but first we need to deal with the immediate problem of Jenkins and his friends." Over coffee at Olivia's kitchen table, they discussed options. The threat was real. Jenkins's humiliation at being caught rustling, combined with his obvious fixation on Olivia, made him dangerous. "I could stay at the ranch until this blows over," Olivia suggested. "There's safety in numbers." Nathan considered this. "It's not a bad idea in the short term. But I don't want you to feel driven from your home. It's not forever," Olivia pointed out practically. "Just until Sheriff Davis sorts things out with Burton and Jenkins." The solution made sense, though Nathan recognized it would add fuel to the town gossip about their relationship. But that seemed a minor concern compared to Olivia's safety. "All right," he agreed. "Pack what you need for a few weeks. I'll help secure the place before we leave." They worked efficiently, making sure the livestock had adequate food and water, boarding up the cabin's windows, and hiding Olivia's valuables in case of a break-in. By mid-afternoon, they were ready to depart, Olivia's necessities loaded onto her horse while she rode double with Nathan. The closeness of her body behind him, her arms around his waist as they rode, felt right in a way Nathan hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just physical attraction, though that was undeniably present. It was a sense of completeness, of pieces fitting together that had been separate for too long. When they arrived at the Quinn ranch, Marcus greeted them with raised eyebrows but no comment beyond, got the east bedroom ready for Miss Easton. The other hands were more openly curious, especially Charlie, the youngest at barely 20. But Nathan's brief explanation about Jenkins's threats and the need for Olivia's safety satisfied them, at least outwardly. That evening, after a dinner where Olivia charmed the men with her wit and genuine interest in their work, Nathan walked her to the east bedroom door. "Will you be comfortable enough?" he asked, suddenly awkward in this new dynamic. Olivia smiled up at him. "I'll be fine. Thank you for opening your home to me." "Our home," Nathan corrected impulsively. "If you want it to be." The implication was clear and Olivia's eyes widened slightly. "Nathan, are you asking?" He hadn't planned this moment, had imagined something more romantic, more deliberate, but now that the words hung between them, Nathan couldn't imagine taking them back. "I am," he confirmed, taking her hands in his. "Not because of Jenkins or the danger, but because I love you and want to build a life with you. Here, on your homestead, wherever you want. I just know I don't want to be without you." Tears spilled onto Olivia's cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want that too." Nathan bent to kiss her, a gentle touch that conveyed promise rather than passion, mindful of their surroundings and the propriety Olivia deserved. When he pulled back, her smile was luminous. "Good night, Nathan," she said softly. "We'll talk more tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he agreed, reluctantly releasing her hands. "Sleep well, Olivia." As he walked to his own room, Nathan felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. Despite the threats hanging over them, despite the complications still to be navigated, he was certain of his path forward for the first time since Sarah's death. In the quiet of his room, Nathan removed his hat and held it for a moment, remembering the night Olivia had found him weeping into it by the creek. How fitting that the symbol of his deepest grief would also be present at the moment he chose to fully embrace life again. "I kept my promise, Sarah," he whispered to the empty room. "I'm living again." The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sheriff Davis confronted Wade Burton about his men's activities, resulting in the firing of Jenkins, Reed, and Blackburn from the double bar. But the men didn't leave the area, instead taking up residence in a line shack on unclaimed land to the north, occasionally being spotted in timberline, usually drunk and increasingly belligerent. Meanwhile, Nathan and Olivia began planning their future. They decided to marry in April, as soon as the spring mud dried enough for travel. The Quinn Ranch would remain their primary home, but they would maintain Olivia's homestead as well, potentially developing it as the operation expanded. Word of their engagement spread quickly through the community, bringing a steady stream of visitors to the ranch, some to congratulate them sincerely, others barely disguising their curiosity about the widow's rapid courtship. Mary Donovan organized a small gathering of local women to help Olivia prepare for the wedding, bringing gifts of linens and preserved foods, while offering advice that made Olivia blush to the roots of her hair. Throughout it all, Nathan watched in amazement as Olivia seamlessly integrated herself into ranch life. She helped with meals, learned the bookkeeping system Nathan had developed, and even assisted with a difficult foaling when one of the mares went into labor during a late March snowstorm. "You're a natural at this," Nathan observed as they walked back from the barn after checking on the new colt. Olivia laughed. "Hardly, but I'm a quick study and your men are patient teachers." She glanced up at him. "Does it surprise you that I can adapt to ranch life?" Nathan considered the question. "Not surprise exactly, it's more that I'm grateful. Not every woman would embrace this life so wholeheartedly. Not every woman spent her childhood reading dime novels about the frontier," Olivia replied with a smile. Besides, there's something honest about this work, challenging but straightforward. They had reached the porch of the main house, and Nathan pulled her close, no longer concerned about who might see their affection. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" "You have," Olivia murmured, tilting her face up for his kiss. "But I don't mind hearing it again." Their moment of tenderness was interrupted by the sound of approaching riders. Nathan turned, instantly alert to see Marcus galloping toward the house, followed by Charlie. Both men looked grim. "Trouble?" Nathan called as they dismounted. Marcus nodded tersely. "Jenkins and his boys hit the Easton place, burned the barn." Olivia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "The animals let them out first, looks like," Charlie said quickly. "Saw the horses and that milk cow of yours grazing near the creek. Chickens were scattered but alive." "But the barn's gone," Marcus confirmed, "and they broke some windows in the cabin, ransacked the place pretty good." Nathan felt Olivia tremble beside him, whether from shock or anger he couldn't tell. His own emotions were a storm of fury and guilt, fury at Jenkins for his vindictiveness, guilt that Olivia's property had been targeted because of her association with him. "Did you see them?" Nathan asked sharply. Marcus shook his head. "They were long gone, but it was them all right. Jenkins left his bandana tied to what's left of the corral post, wanted us to know who did it." Olivia drew a deep breath, visibly steadying herself. "I need to see it," she said firmly, "assess the damage." Nathan wanted to refuse to protect her from the sight of her violated home, but he recognized the determination in her voice and knew she needed to confront this directly. "We'll ride out first thing tomorrow," he promised. "It's too close to dark now to do much." Olivia nodded reluctantly, acknowledging the practicality of his decision. "What about the animals?" "Charlie and I rounded up what we could," Marcus said. "Brought the cow and chickens back with us, left some feed for the horses, figured they'd be all right for the night." "Thank you," Olivia said, genuine gratitude in her voice despite her distress, "for saving them and for telling us directly." As Marcus and Charlie moved off toward the bunkhouse, Nathan wrapped his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "I'm so sorry," he murmured. If you say this is your fault, Nathan Quinn, I swear I will walk straight back to my homestead alone," Olivia interrupted fiercely. "Jenkins did this because he's a coward and a bully, not because of you." Her vehemence startled him. "Still, if I hadn't met you, I might have frozen to death in that first blizzard," Olivia countered, "or starved when my supplies ran low, or any number of other fates that befall women foolish enough to homestead alone." Her expression softened. "Meeting you has brought me far more good than harm, Nathan. A barn can be rebuilt. What we've found together is irreplaceable." The simple wisdom of her perspective humbled him. Nathan pulled her closer, marveling at her resilience. "You're an extraordinary woman, Olivia Easton." "Soon to be Quinn," she reminded him with a small smile. "And don't you forget it." The next morning, they rode out to assess the damage to Olivia's homestead. The sight that greeted them was sobering, the barn reduced to charred timbers, windows of the cabin broken, the interior ransacked. But as they took inventory, Nathan was relieved to find the destruction, while malicious, was not as complete as he'd feared. "The structure of the cabin is sound," he noted, examining the foundation and walls. "Windows can be replaced easily enough. The barn." He sighed, looking at the blackened remains. "That's a bigger job, but we can rebuild it before winter." Olivia moved through the cabin, straightening overturned furniture, gathering scattered belongings. "They were looking for something," she observed. "See how the mattress is slashed." "And they pried up some of the floorboards." Nathan frowned. "What would they expect to find?" "Money, I suppose," Olivia replied with a shrug. "Fortunately, I keep very little cash on hand, and what I do have is at the bank in Timberline." They spent the day securing what remained of value and boarding up the broken windows. Nathan sent Charlie to town with a full report for Sheriff Davis, though he held little hope the law would be able to prove Jenkins's involvement despite the deliberately left bandana. As the sun began to set, Nathan found Olivia standing amid the ruins of the barn, her expression pensive. "Ready to head back?" he asked gently. She nodded, but didn't move immediately. "It's strange," she said after a moment. I should feel violated, furious, and I am, to some extent. But mostly I feel resolute. They thought this would break me, drive me away. Instead, it's made me more determined to stay, to build something lasting here. Nathan felt a surge of pride and love for this woman who refused to be intimidated. We'll rebuild it all, he promised. Better than before. Olivia turned to him, the setting sun casting a golden glow over her face. I know we will, together. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that Jenkins's attack on the homestead was just the beginning, that the man's hatred had festered into something dangerous and unpredictable. His concerns were validated the following morning when Sheriff Davis rode out to the Quinn ranch, his expression grave. Jenkins and his boys got drunk at the saloon last night, he reported, accepting a cup of coffee from Olivia. Boasting about how they'd taught the uppity schoolmarm a lesson. When I tried to question them, they cleared out, caught up with them at their camp, but they'd packed up and disappeared. Any idea where they went? Nathan asked. Davis shook his head. Could be anywhere. But Jenkins made some specific threats before he left town, against both of you. He looked directly at Olivia. Said no woman turns him down without consequences. Olivia's face paled slightly, but her voice remained steady. He seems to be having difficulty accepting rejection. Man's unhinged, Davis said bluntly. Been that way since he got back from the war, according to folks who knew him before. The drinking makes it worse. He turned to Nathan. I'd advise keeping your men armed and alert, and you might want to consider postponing any travel until we locate Jenkins and his companions. The warning cast a shadow over their wedding plans. The ceremony was scheduled for just 2 weeks away, with Pastor Williams set to officiate at the small church in Timberline. We could delay, Nathan suggested after Davis had departed. Wait until this situation is resolved. Olivia considered this, then shook her head firmly. No. I won't let Jenkins dictate our lives. We'll take precautions, but the wedding proceeds as planned. Her determination settled the matter. In the days that followed, preparations continued, though with added security measures. Nathan's men took turns patrolling the ranch boundaries, and no one traveled alone, even for short distances. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and mild, the first truly spring-like day of the year. Nathan woke early, his mind filled with a mixture of joy and apprehension. The sheriff had reported no sightings of Jenkins or his companions for over a week, but the absence of information was hardly reassuring. Marcus found him on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the distant mountains in shades of pink and gold. Big day, the foreman observed, offering Nathan a cup of coffee. Nathan nodded, accepting the cup gratefully. Never thought I'd be doing this again. Marcus leaned against the porch railing. Sarah would approve, you know, of Olivia, of you moving forward. I know, Nathan said softly. Took me a while to believe it, but I know she would. They stood in companionable silence, watching the ranch come to life around them. In a few hours, they would ride into Timberline for the ceremony. Mary Donovan had insisted on hosting a small reception afterward at her home, and then Nathan and Olivia would return to the ranch to begin their life together officially. The simplicity of the plan appealed to Nathan. No elaborate celebrations, no pretense, just a public declaration of their commitment before those who mattered to them. Inside the house, he could hear movement as Olivia prepared for the day. She had maintained a separate bedroom throughout their engagement, insisting on propriety despite their isolated location. Nathan had respected her wishes, though the anticipation of finally sharing his life and home with her completely had grown with each passing day. The journey to Timberline passed without incident. Nathan had arranged for 6 of his men to accompany them, positioned strategically before and after the wedding party. The precaution might have seemed excessive to some, but Nathan wasn't willing to take chances with Olivia's safety, not with Jenkins's threats still hanging over them. The church was filled with well-wishers, ranchers, and townspeople who had come to respect Olivia during her months in the community, along with those who had known Nathan for years. Even Wade Burton made an appearance, Perhaps as a gesture of goodwill after the trouble his former employees had caused. Nathan waited at the altar, Marcus beside him as his best man. When the door opened and Olivia appeared, escorted by Thomas Donovan in lieu of her deceased father, Nathan felt his breath catch in his throat. She wore a simple gown of pale blue silk, not white, as she had been practical enough to recognize that a working ranch was no place for a dress that would only be worn once. But the color suited her, bringing out the warmth in her eyes and the natural flush of her cheeks. Her dark hair was arranged in an elegant knot, adorned with small white flowers that Mary Donovan had somehow procured despite the early season. As Olivia moved toward him down the short aisle, Nathan was struck by the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a chance encounter by a creek on a cold night to a future neither had imagined possible. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. They exchanged simple vows, promising to cherish and support one another through whatever life might bring. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Olivia with a tenderness that belied the depth of his emotion, conscious of their audience but unable to completely hide the love that filled his heart. The reception at the Donovan home was a lively affair, with food and music and genuine goodwill from most of those present. Nathan noticed a few disapproving glances from the more conservative members of the community who perhaps thought their courtship had been too brief. But such concerns seemed trivial compared to the joy of the day. As the celebration continued, Nathan found himself drawn into a conversation with Wade Burton, who had been uncharacteristically subdued throughout the event. "Wanted to apologize properly," the rancher said gruffly, offering his hand to Nathan. "For what Jenkins and the others did. Never gave them any order to rustle your cattle or harass your wife." Nathan accepted the handshake cautiously. "I believe you, but they were your responsibility." Burton nodded, acknowledging the point. "That's why I let them go as soon as I heard. Should have seen the warning signs earlier." Jenkins, especially Mann's, got a darkness in him. "Any idea where they might have gone?" Nathan asked, keeping his tone conversational despite the seriousness of the question. Burton shook his head. "Could be anywhere by now. Heard rumors some outfit down in Wyoming's hiring guns for a range war brewing there." He hesitated, then added, "Just watch your back, Quinn. Jenkins isn't one to forget a grudge." The warning cast a brief shadow over Nathan's mood, but he refused to let it dampen the significance of the day. As the afternoon waned, he sought out Olivia, finding her in conversation with Mary Donovan and several other women. "Ready to head home, Mrs. Quinn?" he asked, still marveling at how natural the name sounded applied to her. Olivia's smile was answer enough. They said their goodbyes, accepting congratulations and well wishes, then mounted their horses for the journey back to the ranch. Nathan's men maintained their protective positions, vigilant despite the festive occasion. The ride passed peacefully, the landscape bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. As they crested the final rise before the ranch came into view, Nathan reined in his horse, signaling the others to continue ahead. "Everything all right?" Olivia asked, bringing her mount alongside his. Nathan nodded, his gaze taking in the panorama before them, the sprawling ranch buildings nestled in the valley, the cattle grazing on the greening spring pastures, the mountains rising majestically in the distance. "I just wanted a moment," he explained, "to remember this. You and me at the beginning." Olivia reached across the space between them to take his hand. "Not the beginning," she corrected gently, "a continuation for both of us." The wisdom in her words touched him deeply. It was true they each brought their past experiences, their joys and sorrows, to this union. Their marriage wasn't an erasure of what had come before, but a new chapter built upon the foundation of all they had lived through. "I love you, Olivia Quinn," Nathan said, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue. "And I love you, Nathan Quinn," she replied, her eyes reflecting the sunset and something more a promise of all the days to come. They rode the remaining distance to the ranch side by side, hands occasionally brushing, sharing smiles that needed no words. As they dismounted in the yard, Nathan's men discreetly made themselves scarce, heading toward the bunkhouse with knowing grins that they tried, mostly unsuccessfully, to hide. Marcus was the last to leave, pausing to say simply, "Congratulations again. We'll handle everything tomorrow." "Take your time." Then they were alone, standing before the home they would now truly share. Nathan swept Olivia into his arms, carrying her across the threshold as tradition demanded. Her laughter echoed in the entryway, bright and joyous. "Welcome home," Nathan whispered as he set her gently on her feet. Olivia's response was to draw his head down for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, a future built on understanding, respect, and a love that had come unexpectedly, but would endure through whatever challenges awaited them. In the months that followed, Nathan and Olivia settled into the rhythms of married life with a naturalness that surprised even them. The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship, with Olivia bringing fresh perspectives that complemented Nathan's experience. They rebuilt the barn at her homestead, stronger than before, and planted the fruit trees she had envisioned along its southern boundary. Jenkins and his companions faded from immediate concern as weeks passed with no sign of them. Sheriff Davis reported they had indeed been spotted in Wyoming, apparently hired as muscle in a dispute between cattle barons that had turned violent. While the news brought relief, Nathan maintained a vigilant watch, unwilling to be caught unprepared should the men ever return. By late summer, there was new joy to celebrate. Olivia was expecting their first child, due to arrive in the early spring. The news spread quickly through the community, bringing a fresh wave of congratulations and advice from neighboring women. Nathan found himself oscillating between exhilaration and terror at the prospect of fatherhood. Emotions Olivia met with her characteristic blend of practicality and warmth. "You'll be a wonderful father," she assured him one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. "You have so much love to give, Nathan." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach, marveling at the miracle growing within. "I never thought I'd have this chance," he admitted. "After Sarah, I assumed that part of my life was over." Olivia covered his hand with her own. "Life has a way of surprising us, of giving second chances when we least expect them." As autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, they prepared for the coming winter, their first as a married couple. The ranch was bustling with activity as hay was stored, livestock sorted, and buildings reinforced against the coming cold. Olivia's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body changing gradually to accommodate the new life within. Nathan found himself watching her with a mixture of awe and protectiveness, amazed by her strength and the calm joy with which she approached motherhood. One crisp October evening, as the first dusting of snow outlined the distant peaks, Nathan sat at his desk reviewing the season's accounts. The ranch had done well, with cattle prices higher than expected, and several of their trained horses fetching premium prices from buyers back east. Olivia entered the study carrying 2 cups of tea. Her pregnancy was more visible now, a gentle rounding beneath the loose dress she wore. "How are the numbers looking?" she asked, setting 1 cup beside him. "Better than I hoped," Nathan replied, pulling her gently onto his lap. "We'll be able to add that north pasture we've been discussing and still have enough set aside for the baby and any emergencies." Olivia smiled, leaning into his embrace. "I had a letter from Mary Donovan today. She's already knitting blankets for the little one." Nathan chuckled. "That woman has appointed herself honorary grandmother to half the children in the territory." "We're fortunate to have her," Olivia said softly, "to have this community around us." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their tea and enjoying the simple pleasure of being together. Through the window, Nathan could see the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, bright and clear in the mountain air. "I've been thinking," Olivia said eventually. "About names for the baby." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Already, we've months yet to decide." "I know," she acknowledged. "But I wanted to suggest, if it's a girl, perhaps we could name her Sarah." The suggestion caught Nathan completely off guard. He stared at Olivia, searching her face for any sign of discomfort or forced generosity. but her expression held only sincerity and love. You would want that. He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Olivia nodded. She was an important part of your life, Nathan, a part that helped make you the man I love. I would be honored to give our daughter her name to carry forward her memory in that way. Tears pricked at Nathan's eyes, unexpected but welcome. In that moment, he felt the final pieces of his healing fall into place, not forgetting Sarah, never that, but fully integrating her memory into the life he now shared with Olivia. "Thank you," he whispered, drawing Olivia closer. "It's a beautiful gesture. But only if you're truly comfortable with it." "I am," she assured him, "and if it's a boy," Nathan considered. "My father's name was James. It's a good, solid name." "James Quinn," Olivia tested the name. "I like it, though we could also consider naming him after Marcus. That would certainly guarantee us the most loyal foreman in Montana territory for life." Nathan laughed, grateful for her ability to lighten even the most emotional moments. "Marcus would never let us hear the end of it. His hat wouldn't fit his swelled head." They continued discussing names, both serious suggestions and increasingly outlandish ones that left them laughing together as the evening deepened around them. When they finally retired to bed, Nathan held Olivia close, her back against his chest, his hand resting protectively over their growing child. "I never dreamed I could be this happy again," he murmured against her hair. Olivia brought his hand to her lips, kissing his palm softly. "Nor I." "But here we are." "Here we are," Nathan agreed, marveling at the journey that had brought them together from a broken man crying into his hat on a cold night to this moment of complete contentment. As he drifted towards sleep, Nathan reflected on the unpredictability of life, its capacity for both devastating loss and unexpected joy. He had learned that grief and love could coexist, that moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past. Most importantly, he had discovered that the heart's capacity for love was not limited. It could expand to embrace new connections while honoring those that came before. With Olivia's warmth beside him and the promise of their child's future ahead, Nathan Quinn fell asleep beneath the vast Montana sky, grateful for second chances and the courage to accept them.